Okay, Shad, it's 6 p.m. Let's get started.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bincy Jacob, and I'm a community organizer as well as being a full-time realtor here in Houston, Texas. I'm joined here today by Mr. Shad Bogany, who I will introduce in a minute. Okay, Shad, it's 6 p.m. Let's get. I heard an echo. Okay, hope that's fixed. The topic for today's panel is racism and housing segregation in America, spanning the country's founding to today in 2020. In simpler terms, housing segregation is the separation of whites, blacks, and other groups in the same community. This is a critical topic to understand as we continue to look at systems of racism within our country, since where we live has a huge impact on education, environmental safety, access to healthcare, and other critical needs. So before we go any further, let me introduce my panelist, my guest here today, Mr. Shad Bogany. I will let Shad give a more detailed explanation of his background, but I'm very honored to be in his presence. Shad is a broker associate with Better Homes and Gardens, Gary Green, and he is the team leader of the Shad Bogany team. Shad was the 2002 the head of the Houston Association of Realtors, the chairperson, and in 2013 was a chairman for the Texas Association of Realtors. He also served on the board of the National Association of Realtors. And when we say realtor associations, these are the bodies that represent realtors in local and national groups and influence policy work, education, and the work of real estate professionals across the country. So welcome, Shad, to the MBLM panel today. Thank you so much for taking your time to join us. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself before we delve into the group?
Thank you, Benji. I am so honored that your group has taken a look at something that should matter to everyone, and that is what's going on, whether it's affecting you now or later or could affect you immediately. It's just, we can't fix anything unless we all join hands and work together to get things fixed, because it could be you next time versus me. And to kind of give you some of my background, I sat on the board of Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs for 7 years. So I dealt a lot with tax credits, low income housing, workforce housing, which is I like to prefer name, low income housing, workforce housing. I've also sat on several boards here, Fort Bend Housing Finance Board that handles down payment assistance and making money available for first time home buyers. I also sit on Houston Area Urban League, Community Development Corporation. I was chair there, and I've been involved with making affordable housing available to first-time home buyers there. I've had an opportunity doing leadership training from Tyler, Texas, all the way to El Paso. So I've had a lot of training and working with affordable housing. It's not all that I do, but it is a passion I have, that everybody deserves a nice place to stay. And that's my goal. I do a radio talk show here in Houston on real estate. I've done this radio show for 30 years, how to buy, how to sell houses. I take consumer questions. We're live. I'm not in the morning, I'm in drive time, 6:15 to 7:15 every Tuesday. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been doing a TV show called the same thing, The Real Estate Corner, where we try to educate people on how to buy houses, what to do. I try to be the voice of reason and the buffer zone between you and your realtor. I am the consumer guy who tries to keep the consumers, letting them know what's going on with the market. So that's kind of an overview of my background.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention the 30 years doing a real estate show on a radio show on real estate is outstanding. So thank you for joining us.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to dive into it. We announced this panel, and all of a sudden I get comments and questions. Why are we having this conversation? Isn't Black Lives Matter and all this just about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or any of the other multiple Black lives lost to extrajudicial violence? Why are we talking about real estate and racism or related to BLM?
Well, first of all, um, the things that happened to George Floyd, Michael Brown, and Breonna Taylor is you only saw them because we had cameras and technology that we have today. Those things have been happening in my community for hundreds of years. And if you go on YouTube, you can see whole communities being destroyed, like Black Wall Street in Tulsa. Destroyed a whole community. 300 to 400 people were killed, Black people. And the government never did anything. Nobody came to their defense. And so when you look at the history of what's going on, those are three things that have popped up, but they've been going on. There's a lynching museum in Montgomery, Alabama, to honor all the people who've been lynched. You know, think about the Emmett Tills of the world. Emmett Till could be George Floyd today. Emmett Till actually got the civil rights movement going, and that's the reason Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, because she felt something had to be done. So this has been going on for years in our community. How does it relate to real estate? Is because the issue of owning real estate is the wealth building. This is the American way here in this country, is to build wealth and own something. We're the only country in the world that you can actually come here and buy something, even though you're not a citizen, you live somewhere else. So it's all about wealth building in this country. Well, Black people have been denied that opportunity. I'll give you a very quick example of that. There was a town called Levittstown up in Pennsylvania. Everybody has heard of Levittstown, one of the first suburban neighborhoods. Well, Black people helped build Levittstown, but they couldn't live there. So in 1947, the purchase of a home in Levittstown was $6,970, okay? Today, that home in Levittstown is worth $450,000. So think of all the Black people who were denied an opportunity to live there, and all the wealth building that could have been done by having that opportunity to be able to purchase those homes. So we started in the back way before 1970, 1990, 2000. We've never been given an equal opportunity, even though it was on the books to have it, even though the Constitution said that we had it. We were never been given that true opportunity to have it. And I could go on that history. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now I'll get in some details there. Sorry about going too long.
That's perfect, perfect. And it leads into the next question that I kept getting. You know, it's 2020. If you have money, can't you just go buy a house? What is this? You know, there's nobody stopping you from buying over here or stopping you from buying over there. What do you say to that? Because even realtors will say that, and we know there's some facts behind that that may not be true.
Well, think about it. For a long time through this country, this country lately, with the market being hot, we had off-market listings. So only a few people knew about those listings. That was the new Jim Crow, was to be able to teach not show properties to certain people. My sellers only want certain buyers to come over to look at these particular properties. We have Long Island divided. If none of your membership or people that are involved in your community have not seen this, this is called Long Island divided. It was a news report where we all knew it went on, but nobody had any videos of it. So in 2017, they sent in workers, black and white couples, white couples, black couples, and they went into neighborhoods to realtors to ask them about buying a house. They found out in 2017 that realtors treated black and white customers differently. White people came in with certain income, certain education. Black people came in with the same education, same income, and was asked for, white people were never asked for a approval letter. Black people, well, I can't show you any houses until you get an approval letter. So even though we think things are okay, Long Island divided showed that things are not okay, and this goes on every time. I don't know it, because if a white customer, white realtor's talking to a white client, a customer, I don't know what the conversation is unless that white client calls and tells me. where this was all on video, where they told one couple, the white couple, this was a bad school, told the black couple, this is a great school, you want to be there. So it is so, it's here, it's been there. I'm not the oldest person, but I've even went out and showed property myself and couldn't get in. I was denied access, and the lady was very pointed. We knew you were coming. We knew what company you were with. We just didn't know it was you. No, you cannot show my house today. So this is something that's been going on, and I'm hoping the education, and if it hadn't happened to you, it could happen to you if we don't fix it. And what I'm learning in today's world is that racism is not a deal breaker for a whole lot of people. Why are we even having a debate? Why are we even having this show about racism and systematic racism in real estate? We shouldn't even be having this. We have a code of ethics that talks about racism, and it talks about that we should treat everybody fair and equal. But 50, 60 years ago, that code of ethics said that you couldn't show houses to Black people or Indian people or Mexican people or Chinese people at all.
Exactly. And that's perfect, because that's the next thing I was going to read. Great segue. When I became a realtor about it was about 6.5 years ago. And I, went to the fair housing classes and went to don't discriminate, don't, treat people differently based on what they look like, don't steer them, don't block bust, all these definitions. But one thing I didn't know is that even the National Association of Realtors, which I am a member of, had in their realtor code of ethics, and I believe from 1924 to 1950, it says, a realtor should never be instrumental in introducing into a neighborhood a character of property or occupancy, members of any race or nationality, or any individuals whose presence will clearly be detrimental to property values in that neighborhood. So I as a realtor would not have been allowed to sell a home in a predominantly white community to a person of color, because the neighborhood property values would come down. And that was only taken out of our code of ethics in 1950, which when I realized this maybe a few months ago, it hurt me in a way, because I didn't realize I was being complicit to the system and trying to really figure out how do we work even more to make up for what we haven't done. I think I may have lost Chad, so I'm going to keep going. I don't know if folks have any questions so far that we can address. I'm going to wait for Chad to log back in. A little bit of technical difficulties. So just speaking a little bit to what Shad was saying, the Long Island Divided investigation, it comes with a 43-minute video that summarizes the investigation, and it's on the website. So hopefully one of the admins will post that, and we can, you're welcome to see it. It's really eye-opening, and it was just published in December of 2019. So it's very relevant and recent information. So well, Shad, go ahead.
I blinked out a minute. I didn't know if you guys.
Welcome back. Yes, you're good.
Thank you. One of the things that for many, many years back in the day, the 1800s, after slavery, Reconstruction, white people and Black people lived next to each other. It was just the way things were. That did not change until the government got involved. The biggest person of segregation in this country is the federal government. The biggest city in the country that's segregated the most is Chicago. So Detroit, New York, where I live in Houston, is not as much, but if you'll notice, the majority of white people live northwest than they live south. So we've been going on this, the government is the main culprit in this discrimination, because they were making sure that it happened. And so, and I'll give you some examples of this. In the Constitution, it said everything was equal. But after the Plessy versus Ferguson, it got to be, it's equal, but separate. And so then as things went along, the Supreme Court in 1917 said, oh, no, it's we cannot discriminate. You cannot, the Supreme Court said this. So then what happened all across this country, local municipalities, local governments, developers came up with this thing called deed restrictions. So in the deed restrictions, you can't tell a private owner who he can sell his property to. So then you got all these restricted covenants, like Asians can't live there, Black people can't live there, Mexican people can't live there, and so on and so on. Only for white people, you cannot sell at this point. So the federal government went and started this desegregation. It wasn't only that our soldiers could go fight, but couldn't come back home and eat at the same restaurant as somebody else, or take this even worse, World War II, after we won World War II, the Black soldiers came on, we had the GI Bill. The GI Bill's goal was to get more people into housing and keep the economy going. But the exception in the GI Bill, Black soldiers could not use it. They just died and fell in and did everything they could do for this country. And then they wasn't able to use it. Then you get into, as years pass on, before that we had 1934 housing bill. That was a big housing bill based on FDR. And he was trying to get the economy going, came up, but Black people were excluded from the housing bill. So from 34 to the 50s, white people have had a jump on us in building wealth, absolutely building wealth. And so when you get back and you look at all the things that are there, we've had a systematic system in process to keep us from being able to build wealth and grow with the economy. Now, the other thing as we bring this to more recent, as you talked about Long Island Divided, is that when we had the meltdown in real estate, if you go look at all the subprime loans, we had, most of them were in Black communities. Hardly, when I say Black, let's just say minority communities. Most of them were in minority communities all over the country. I would have people call me on the radio and tell me they had a 700, 800 credit score and they got a 2010.
I think we lost Shad again. My goodness, I don't know if folks are as riveted as I am in listening to this conversation. Shad and I had talked about a week ago in planning, which is when he shared about the GI Bill. Keep going, Shad.
I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm on Xfinity, so anybody using Xfinity, you see what kind of issue.
Okay.
The 90-10-10 loan, I don't know how much you heard of that, but the 90-10-10 loans, the 80-10-10 loans, 80-20, all were done in Black communities. I'd have people call me on the radio and says, I've got an 80-20 loan and I got a subprime loan and I had an 800 credit score. Why is that? And so the system has been set up that we are set to fail. Look at AI. I was in a meeting a couple of years ago where AI is telling the lenders where to loan and where not to loan to. Mm-hmm. So they're using the new technology. So this systematic racism has been there for many, many years. And the main corporate of it has been the government, who have told appraisers, if it's in a Black neighborhood, lower the value. And so it's crazy. And I've experienced that with where I've had an appraiser come out and look at a property and he went to another Black neighborhood to look for comps. He skipped over several white neighborhoods that were closer to go get another Black neighborhood so he could use that as a comp. So this systematic racism is here. It could happen to your group. It could happen to my group. It's been there. Now what we've got is we don't need any new laws, guys. All the laws are on the books. Sure. The problem that we have is enforcing those rules. That's the problem that we have, is enforcing the rules. And even back in the early 1900s, the presidents, especially Woodrow Wilson, told them not to enforce the rules. Yeah, the Supreme Court said it, but don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at the racism that's before us, why in 1968, the home ownership rate is the same as it is in 2020? Somebody tell me what's going on there. We make more money than we've ever made. We're more educated than we've ever been. why are we still in this systematic system of racism? And now you see a lot of it, Bincy, when you get into apartments, tax credit apartments. I've been sitting on Texas Department of Housing. I can tell you in Texas, there are places in Texas where there's no running water. You would not believe in a state like Texas that they've got communities along the border that has no running water. They living in cardboard boxes in a state like us, and nobody's really doing anything about it. Nobody's trying to bring water to these people.
Well, Shad, let me ask, we have one of our audience is asking, who is supposed to enforce these rules? You said we have the rules, but who's supposed to enforce them?
Houston, the HUD department.
Housing and
Urban Development should be doing the rules. Give you a rule right now. This is for the AFF rule that has to do with disparity, not putting all poor people in one area, making sure that they're all over the place. Well, what did they just say? What did Trump just say? That's a Supreme Court law. Yes. What did they say? Oh, we're just going to suspend it and we're not going to enforce it. We're just going to turn a blink eye to it. And so that's a perfect example of that.
That's the challenge, is that HUD and a lot of these federal oversight agencies are at the whim of politics, right? So it doesn't sit on a moral compass, but it sits on whoever's in power. And we can arguably say, you know, one party pushes for one and the other party pushes for the other. Some say both parties do the same thing. I mean, whichever way we're looking at it, there is this power that sits in the federal government and sits in our elections, because that is ultimately how we decide how these rules are enforced. I think Shad is frozen again. Shad, are you there?
That is exactly right. It keeps becoming.
We are having a few technical difficulties. So while we're waiting for Shad to come back, you know, I think it's really interesting to read. There was another, a few of the Supreme Court, the cases that Shad was referring to. One of them was called Buchanan versus Worley, and that was in 1917. And if you look at that, the Supreme Court says you cannot have explicit racial zoning segregation. You cannot have, you know, say, deed restrictions with no Black people or no people of color in a certain neighborhood, right? But what ended up happening is localities and communities quickly switched gears and said, we're going to preserve this racial caste system by changing from race-based zoning to economic zoning. So based on how much money you make, based on how much, you know, wherever your economy is, that is where they're going to exclude people from, which is why the zoning laws that we still see in this country today says, oh, you can only have single family homes in this area. You can only have multifamily apartments in the other area, because easily that could have been built in proximity to each other. We could have all lived in the same communities and same neighborhoods, just in different types of housing. But rather than doing that, what was created was, we're going to create zones where people can only build big houses and stores and malls, and the other urban areas go further into urban plight because that's where the multifamily homes are. I was just catching folks up, Shad, as you were returning to us about the economic zoning and how the language switched from racial zoning to economic zoning.
Bincy, say that again. I'm having internet connections here.
No problem. Can you hear me now? I think we're having a little challenge here, so. So while Shad comes back, I also want to read.
And I apologize. I was trying to find out if I can just do a direct line into my internet, so I'm having issues. What was your question again? And I apologize to you and your audience.
No problem. I was mentioning the Supreme Court. There was a ruling back in 1917 that started saying, no, you cannot have racism in your deed restrictions. You cannot exclude by race. and how quickly communities converted from racial segregation to economic segregation. And we still are experiencing that, where zoning has been put into place where you can only have single family homes that are of larger sizes in certain communities, and other communities have the multifamily apartments, the affordable housing, and which is what you were kind of talking about with the AFFH policy that was stopped in 2018 and then just recently tweeted about by the president this last week about protecting the suburbs from the invasion that's going to be coming.
Right. So let me put this to rest to all your viewers. There's no evidence anywhere that if I put a low-income housing project next to your community that your values are going to go down. There's no evidence. That's all myth. That's all based on emotion and what people want to believe. Your home values can only go down if you decide that you want to sell your house for less money. That you can cause your home values to go down and your neighbors to go down. So there's no evidence of that. Now, let me tell you what the study does say. That if you put all poor people and housing projects all in the same spot, it causes the single family homes to go down if you put too many in there. And I'm such a proponent of this that I sat on the board. We put a housing project down the street from my house that I live in now. I can walk to it and my home values have doubled. So that tells me that's a myth. And I'll take a rich place like, and go to Houston in River Oaks, which is kind of the ritzy area. One of the low income areas, Fourth Ward, is right down the street, didn't cause their home values to go down. So what I'm saying is that if you put everybody in one spot, you can cause it. But if you spread it out, it has no impact on the neighborhoods. And the reason it's so important to spread it all out is because people who have hadn't had the chances others have, it is good for them to see other people succeeding in life, going to school, understanding that things can be better. If I get an education and I work hard, things can get better in my life. But if we put everybody who's in the same boat, we all own food stamps, we all on Section 8, everybody's a maid, nobody's doing anything, you have no growth that you can get bigger and do anything better because everybody around you. So I think it's so important to spread it out and make sure. And in the Obama administration, they did research on this and it works. It actually works. And so a lot of this is legislative creative. In the state of Texas, they gave more points to developers if they put housing projects in urban areas or low income areas. So you would maybe get the tax credits if you put them in those areas. Remember, I started the show by saying that the government is the biggest segregator, is the culprit for segregation in this country. They started it and they've continued with it all the way up to now because the rules are not being enforced.
Absolutely. And I'm going to read one example of that, which you mentioned already, but I'm going to give more detail. It's called redlining. It's a concept we studied back in real estate school, but it was an official position of the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. This was their official rules and guidelines between 1934 and 1962, that the Black community was an adverse influence on property values. So basically what they would say is the FHA manual suggested that they wanted to exclude Blacks from certain neighborhoods. The infiltration, they called it the infiltration of lower class occupancy and inharmonious racial groups. And so any home buyers seeking to purchase in red zone neighborhoods, which means neighborhoods with high Black residents, regardless of the wealth, regardless of the income, regardless of their jobs, would likely be denied a mortgage loan and receive no federal support. And then that eventually, even if they was accepted, the loan interests were much higher in those communities, which is what we commonly call redlining, right? And then you last week told me a statistic, I don't know if you remember it, about the wealth of in Black communities of homes with a bachelor's holder, someone who went to college, versus a white community for high school dropouts. I don't know if you remember that stat.
Yeah, I do, and I have notes here. In the high school dropout that are white, ownership rate is higher than blacks with master degrees and bachelor degrees. So that tells me something's wrong there. I also talked to a good friend of mine who's a loan officer, been in the business for 20, 30 years. And one day we were having a conversation and she happens to be white. And so I told her money is green. It doesn't matter. I mean, the interest that I'm gonna make over 30 years for most lenders should not matter. They're making money. She said, when the underwriter looks at the loan, she does pay attention to whether the person is black or white. So if you give an explanation, she's more likely to believe you if you're white and the black people didn't get a benefit of the doubt. And this is somebody who's actually in it. So I've got to be able to have people tell me who's actually doing it, because, and these are good people who refuse to stay silent. And the same way with Section 8 home ownership. This is another way. With Section 8 home ownership, you can take your voucher and apply it to your income, where most banks will not even accept Section 8 income, home ownership income vouchers for income, even though the FHA say you can, conventional Freddie, Fannie says you can, they won't do it. So they're economically discriminating to keep people on rental housing, where, and the research says that after 3 to 5 years in Section 8, these people actually move off the voucher and paying their house note on their own.
There you go.
So, you know, it's a situation that is so systematically woven into our economic government economics there, we're set apart from everybody else. And so, you know, I don't know how we fix it. I have some ideas on how we can get things fixed. But when you look at the system itself, we can't, it's been terrible for years. It didn't start in 1900. It was going on before then. The communities were being destroyed. And if you don't think that we can have a great community, go look up the Tulsa riot in Wall Street in Oklahoma City, where Black people had airplanes, they were banks, they had a whole community that they were doing things in this community. And all of a sudden white people said, oh, we don't think you should have all these things. They destroyed the whole community and the government never stepped in. You think this is bad? I can take you to Lexington, Kentucky, where a white couple, this guy, black guy was a professor at a university, got a job there, couldn't find housing near the university. A white couple sold them their house, and the white couple went to jail for 15 years for selling his house to a black person in Lexington, Kentucky. Oh. Then what happened was that there was a riot.
I think we lost you again, Shad. I'm going to wait just a minute. I do see there are some questions coming up, so I'm definitely going to be asking those questions to Shad. You were just talking about the riot, Shad?
Yeah, there was a riot and the police was at the riot. This house was completely destroyed by the mob, and this was a white mob. So this mob thing has been going on for years. It didn't start with Black Lives Matter, okay? This mob thing, they destroyed the whole house, and across the street, the police sit there and watched everything did not interrupt or try to protect this black couple's home. So this has been going on and you've got to understand the history of it all to really get a better idea of what's happening here.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. I know we have a little bit more to talk about in our question back and forth, but I want to take some questions from the audience. First of all, I want to shout out to Chase, who is an amazing realtor here in Houston, who said they want to mess up your signal just when you start speaking the truth, Shad. So they're listening.
That's network neutrality is going on there. You know, that's what's going on.
Exactly. Thank you, Chase, for giving us that smile. I want to ask a couple of the questions that have come up. One is I think Desiree asks, how do they know if the underwriter is black or white? Or how does the underwriter know if the applicant is black or white?
Well, typically on the application, it asks what your ethnicity is. And my suggestion, and I've had some Black customers refuse to answer that question, but I'm going to tell you that you should always answer, because that is the only way we to know the statistics of what's going on out there. But I've had some Black clients tell me I'm not answering that question and leave it blank. But typically that's how it's found out. The other thing is that you got to take a copy of your driver's license, okay? So most lenders take a copy of your driver's license and they see.
So I had actually went to get my loan license just to kind of know, how does the back end of this work? I've never done a loan, don't plan on doing it. But in the class, they teach you that if the person refuses to answer, then you have to visually look and make an assessment and mark that on the application. That is the instruction, unless you're taking it over the phone and you can't tell. So
Right.
It is, yeah, it's pretty incredible. We have Jean or Jean-Antoine who's saying New Orleans removed public housing and made it private after Katrina. People had nothing to come back home to. So are we seeing a lot of that, where public housing is being torn down? Or even, we haven't talked about gentrification at all in this conversation. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, we can. Let me give you a brief thing on the public housing. Public housing originated.
Oh, Shad. They don't want you to tell us about public housing, apparently, but we'll wait for you to come back. So I see a few more questions here. If folks have questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. This will also be made available as a video later, so you can go back and listen and look up all the policies and the laws and educate yourself further. Go ahead, Shad. You were talking about public housing.
Housing originally started for white people. What happened is that when the move to the suburbs went out, Black people couldn't go to the suburbs. So they started putting all Black people in public housing. That's why you had the Cabrini Greens and all the different public housing places there. So the issue with public housing, like in Galveston after the hurricane, it was wiped out. Then we had issue housing. The problem that you have is that in New Orleans, for example, the deal was that they wanted that housing to be for people coming into the city, and because it was close in. If you look at all the urban cores of the city, most of those are minority areas, whether Hispanic, whether they're Black, all of that is urban area. What's become more popular? Now being close in and not sitting in 2 hours traffic trying to get home. So now you're seeing the gentrification of people in. And so where an area is being highly gentrified, you don't see hardly any public housing at all if it's been wiped out for flooding. What
Have a small gap again. I do apologize. We'll wait. Chase, I do see your questions. And a few other folks. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you find this conversation just as eye-opening as I did when I started looking into these issues. Go ahead, Shad.
Okay. So, and I apologize, it's got to be on my internet connection, but
That's
public
fine.
housing is being eliminated in certain communities, especially if they're in areas of high demand. It's almost like eminent domain for private use, because they're not rebuilding those in those communities, because the land has become more valuable. And so we've seen it in Houston, we've seen it in Galveston, we've seen it out in Chicago. If you go out to Chicago, going to Midway Airport, all that was public housing.
Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the encouragement. We are going to work through the tech because this is too important not to. So we're going to keep going as many times as it takes, as many breaks as it takes. So Jean says The Color of Law is a great book that talks about a lot of this stuff. I know Shad's not on yet, but I know he agrees. He has read the book twice, I believe. It is a key book, and I think it focuses a little bit on Houston as well, but can be taken nationally. Amazing book. And I forgot the author. It's Richard, although I forgot his last name. I had it here somewhere.
Guys, I really apologize for the connection.
That's okay. We have comments saying we're going to work through this tech stuff. Nobody's leaving. We're riveted. So just keep on going.
All righty. But the overall thing about public housing is that if it's in a location where it's high demand and something happens, hurricane, flooding, tornado, they're not rebuilding it. We had the issue here in Galveston where they've yet to rebuild public housing. What they're started doing is giving these families vouchers. And so the vouchers.
We'll get back to the vouchers. Richard Rothstein is the author of The Color of Law.
Okay. So public housing is a situation where people are trying to get away from it. We're doing more situations where they're doing vouchers, moving people out to the suburbs, and because they're not really doing a lot of public housing. I'll give your listeners and viewers a situation that happened here local in Houston. There was a housing project that could be put in Westheimer and Fountain, which is right in the middle of the Galleria.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to speak really quick. So this project in the middle of the Galleria in Westheimer, what happened here was that the people got in an uproar. We call it NIMBYism, not in my backyard. If you've never heard that term, it's called NIMBYism if you hear that word. And so they got in an uproar. They told the city of Houston that they did not want those people going to their schools. I had a realtor who happened to be in one of the meetings once again, and he called me after the meeting, said, Shad, they don't want this housing project simply because you're Black. They don't want Black people going to school with their kids. And that is their reason. Well, the city of Houston decided not to do that project. They gave NIMBYism a victory. And so, and this same group was going around telling other groups, this is how you keep housing projects out of your neighborhood.
Absolutely. And we still see that today. We'll wait for Shad to get back. Thank you. I see the comments. Divya, Dawn, appreciate it. Yep, we're coming right back, Nusrat. Shad is having a few internet issues, but I need to hear the rest of what he's saying. Very important conversation. Jyotis, Sindhu. I see all of your comments. Thank you all for joining us today. Yes, Hansa, we tried. We thought we were good before we started, but these things happen and it's okay. We'll push through that. So while we're waiting for Shad to come back, I will encourage y'all, Malayalees for Black Lives Matter is a page and a group on Facebook. We try to have really good discussions and make sure that we in the Malayali and Indian communities are looking at ourselves as how we're complicit to racism and racist behavior and how to dismantle that. Go ahead, Shad.
And, you know, so my thought is that housing projects, there's no, as I said earlier, there's no evidence that they bring your property value.
Okay. I think Shad is trying to go and troubleshoot. I see your question, Jean. Chase, I'm trying to pull back up to your question before. I thought that was great.
I'm going to try to run internet direct feed into my laptop and see if that makes it better. If it goes up again, I've just simply brought one of my Wi-Fi things that are in the other side of the house over and see if that helps bring the Wi-Fi in. I apologize for that. And thank you, your audience. I know it's quite hard to watch.
It is okay because, these are not things I think many of us think about on a daily basis, but when we listen to it, we can never unhear or unlearn this, right? So it's such an important conversation. Do you want to keep talking about the housing vouchers?
Well, the thing that I just want to encourage people is that housing vouchers are there. It's very prevalent in California. I went out to speak to some realtors and lenders and realtors in California, how to use Section 8 home ownership. It's even much worse out there. But I found that whenever housing is really expensive, you don't have as many people objecting to tax credit apartments and all of that. We're going to have to do something better in our communities, that when a developer gets tax dollars to build, they should make a certain amount of those units available to first-time home buyers or first-time tenants or low income. Not all of them, but a percentage of them, because they're using tax dollars to build these projects. So I think we're going to have to do a little bit better job of that. In regards to gentrification, I've not been a big proponent of against gentrification, because my attitude is that if we own it, you can't gentrify it. And because in my community, most African Americans rent, the majority, most Hispanics rent, the majority. The Asian population has, I think, one of the highest home ownership rates, and whites have the highest home ownership rates. But when you go to the African American and Hispanic community, and this is the same anywhere in the country, it's not just here locally, it's across the country, that it is an issue with home ownership. So my feeling about gentrification, if I have a neighborhood that, because most of these areas are food deserts, they don't have grocery stores, the base liquor stores, nail shops, hair salons, barber shops. It's pretty much the community in those areas. And why is that? Why can't I have a nice grocery store in these communities? Well, you've got to bring people in to these communities that have the income to support those businesses. And I'll give you a real good example of this, and this is not off topic, but it's important, is the census. We should be encouraging everybody to fill out their census, especially in these low response areas, because I've been in meetings and people would complain that they've got these little corner grocery stores and all this stuff in these areas, and they're not getting the real name brand. Because if I'm a business and I don't know what the income is in the area or the demographics or how many educated, how many people have internet, why would I come in those areas? But sometimes we are our own worst enemies by not filling out the census and making sure that everybody does their census. So that kind of contributes to it also. And that's kind of off topic, but it is a big part of why these areas are being gentrified, because people don't know who's in those communities.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. There's also one more concept called blockbusting, which works a little bit differently. Do you want to talk about what that is?
Let's talk about blockbusting. So this is how blockbusting works. You go to a white neighbor and says, hey, I heard some black people are moving in the neighborhood. Would you be interested in selling their house? Would you be interested in selling your house? So the white person would say, yeah, I don't want to be next to somebody white. Who lowered the value? That white person, not the black person that moved next door. He just assumed his property is worth less, so he sells it for less. We've seen blockbusting where they've actually had people drive through the neighborhood who are black, paid them to drive and play their music loud, or had black families with a stroller going down the sidewalk, walking, and these people were paid. So white people would fly. They would come in and buy it or sell get these properties cheap. Then they would turn around and sell them at a higher value to Black people and give them these crazy loans, which would allow them not to be able to do it. Then they would foreclose it on it and start all over again. So blockbusting is basically making people believe that the values are changing because the demographics of the area is changing. Nobody determines your property going down in value but you. And so if you choose to sell it for less, that's something that you chosen. And so my thing about blockbusting, it was prevalent here in Houston. I can name several neighborhoods. It was prevalent in Chicago for a long time. And so this is something that realtors, lenders have used, developers have used, and it's all on the frightening them that somebody Black is moving in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But let me make a quick comment on just one more quick point. But if Shaq O'Neal is moving in your neighborhood and he's Black, you're probably not gonna sell your house. You see how crazy it is? You know, Michael Jordan's moving in your house, you're probably next door, you're probably not gonna sell your house. Matter of fact, you may ask more for your house. So, you know, it's
right.
crazy.
It brings up the question, you know, folks take this exceptionalism concept and say, well, if that person could do it, then why not everybody else? And so what do you say to that? It's a little bit off of our housing script, but, oh, you know, these people came up by they were able to escape, or they were able to go do this, and, you know.
Well, you know, some things for God bless talent, and sometimes you're able to pull yourself out. You have 10 kids, there's no explanation when you have 10 kids and one of them turns to be a doctor and everybody else is a janitor or an auto mechanic. Nothing against those jobs, but I'm just giving you an example. I think some people are just special. Just in your community, you have, everybody's not a doctor, everybody's not a lawyer, you know, so it's exceptions, but I hate when people start using that because I made it, that everything is okay because Shad made it. It's not always that way. Just as we don't hold white people responsible when that guy went and blew up Tulsa, Oklahoma, David McVeigh or Mike McVeigh, whatever his name was, when he blew up Oklahoma, we didn't all of a sudden say all white people are bombers. But when it comes to minorities, we are having to take that burden on that when the Muslims, sudden all Muslims are something's wrong with them. And we held everybody responsible of that faith when that was wrong, because you cannot do that. And they only do that with minorities. So when that kid goes and shoots up a school, and it's not fair, but as a minority, you carry that burden with you. They have to be exceptional to get jobs. We can't be average, but you can be white and go all the way to the top. Look at your president. You know, look at his business history. You think Obama could have had 6 bankruptcies, 5 wives, and for 5 different women, messing with a prostitute and be president? No, it's just we have to be exceptional. And that's my point. And that goes back to the whole system of racism, that we have to be exceptional, and people got to stop holding us all accountable for one person's action. That is being racist when you do that.
Excellent. We have one more question. We have several questions, but Jean is asking, what are your thoughts on some form of reparations, and specifically how policy can make an impact on housing and home ownership?
Well, in regards to reparations, I'm not a big reparation fan, and I could give all the reasons of why I'm not. But I do believe when you look at what has happened to Black people in real estate, systematic racism, we ought to have an exception like the Indians do in reservations, where there are special programs housing because they've been denied housing for so many years. So I think there should be some sort of bill that mirrors what we do for Indians on reservations, that gives them an opportunity in the Black community for those who fit those opportunities. I think when most people in our community have never owned a house, that we should spend time teaching in high school the importance of home ownership and credit and how to do it. If I've never had anything and I go to college and you send me 100 credit cards and I've never been taught I got to pay them, then I come out of school with school debt and bad credit. What do? I go rent. So those are some things that we have to do. Housing policies that I think that would help is that mirroring that Indian policy. I think is in HUD is policy 188 or something like that. I think what we need to do is enforce the rules. That is what we need to do. And I think the credit scoring, we ought to be able, if I don't believe in credit, then I should be able to use my telephone, my cable bill should be part of that score. All of those items, if I pay my car on time. It's funny, a car note doesn't bring your credit score up, but it brings it down if you don't pay it on time. Mm. So I think we need to relook at that. And what we've done is said one size fit all. Hispanics don't believe in a lot of credit. They say they money, it's mattress money. And it's so funny that in the early 2000s and late 90s, banks were making an exception for mattress money. Now it's no exception. If you bring cash somewhere, you considered a drug dealer. So, you know, I think one size does not fit all. And I think we need to look at the policies that are there. I don't think we need any more policies. I think what we need to do is enforce the rules that are on the books.
Okay, awesome. Chase, I know you had a question before, I don't see it anymore, but Chase does comment. The other thing that's, you know, if you look at an Indian person, you might assume they're a doctor or, you know, some highly educated person. And even just that assumption works in the favor of some communities versus other communities, right?
Yeah, it does. The thing that I'd like to say about racism can be in any color. But the key to it is that if you got control of somebody's lives. Now, I may not like somebody because they're black or white, that's prejudice. But racism is when you have control of what they're doing, banks, jobs, all of that. I cannot be racist against a white person because I don't have any control of anything. Now, I may not like that person, well, that's being prejudiced. But racism is when you have control over people's lives. You determine how much their income is. There's so much documentation over there when people were working in factories, the white worker made more money than the black worker and they were doing the same job. So people need to understand that racism is about control. Now, if I lived in Jamaica and you were white, I could be racist against you because I'm in control of the government there because I'm black, or Africa or Nigeria or whatever. But you gotta have control for true racism. And everybody seems to think that. It's just as if we talk about white privilege. White privilege is not about income. It is about your skin color being able to get things done because your skin color, being able to get a job because your skin color. Affirmative action only cures your human nature. So if two white people come in and I'm white and a white black person come in for a job, it is human nature to favor the white person because I think I've got more in common with that person. Just as a black person comes in a white person and it's a black supervisor. Typically, they're gonna think they have more in common with the black person, unless you're Clarence Thomas. But, you know, it typically that happens. You know what I'm saying? So my feeling is that all these things cure a human nature deal. And racism as a whole, I don't think you can cure it. I find it funny that we're debating something about equal justice and fairness for all. And I'm a true believer that rising tides lift all boats. We've got to start building wealth. There's a problem in my community when the net worth is worth $1,700 and a white person's net worth is $180,000. It has to deal with home ownership. That is the gap that is causing this issue. And so we've got to be able to get more people in housing. And, you know, and I think I don't think we give them away. I think people should earn it. You need to make income. You need to pay your bills on time. All those things need to be in place. But I truly don't feel that, I feel that we're fighting a tide. You know, we talked about blockbusting, steering. You know, we assume that everybody that's Black wants to live in a Black neighborhood. That's not necessarily true. Everybody in Indian that wants to live in an Indian neighborhood, or Asian or Chinese or whatever. That's not true. I will give you one more fact. Any community that's diverse, when you have a downturn on the market, diverse communities recover quicker than our white communities do. That's a fact. And nobody ever talks about it. You know, think about it. Look at the coal miners. Look at, most of them are white. Have you seen the economy changing with the coal miners? They were told it was good, but it's still the same. But if we have a diversity in it, it tends to change on that end.
I love this, Shad. I have a few more questions. We don't have too much time left, so I want to just hit those questions on you. A couple of questions. One is from Chase. Do you believe integration has a negative impact on Black wealth? Would it be better to focus on our own, to create new Black Wall Streets, to create new Seneca Villages?
I don't think we live in a world, I think we live in a world that's worldwide, it's global now. And so I can tell you right now that if you have a house in a Black neighborhood that's predominantly Black, and you have the same house in a white neighborhood, the white neighborhood house that's predominantly white is 23% higher value in resale than the Black neighborhood. I think we learn from each other. I think what makes America great is that we pull from everyone. We invent things, because when you come to a room, they're bringing you to that room for different thoughts. If everybody thinks the same, we're not going to have any growth, no breaking news, because we all think the same. You know, and I'm showing my age a little bit because I'm having some senior moments, but yeah, we all think the same. And I can take, and I'll take China, for example. What does China invent? Nothing. All they do is make better. What does Japanese invent? Nothing. They just make things better. What happens here is, in America, is that we pull from everybody. Everybody is part of it. And I think when you have a diverse government, sometimes I can't see it, but you may see it. Our experiences are different as we grow up. And so I think diversity is really important. And no, I'm not for segregated Black neighborhoods. Wall Street, Black Wall Street was there because they couldn't live anywhere else. They couldn't live. The doctor lived next door to the maid. The maid lived next door to the janitor. And the school teacher lived next door to the lawyer. That's what happened. But when we desegregated, when we integrated, then those lawyers and doctors, because they could live anywhere, went and lived in those particular areas. That goes back to the desperate impact of neighborhoods, of allowing people who have less income to live anywhere they can afford to live, or even making places for them in those areas. What's wrong with you having a job, you work at Starbucks, and not having an apartment that you don't have to go across town to work there? Nothing wrong with that.
Right, absolutely. One more question. Is it realistic to believe that we can enforce policy when our very own associations like NAR had racist policies on the book, FHA had discriminatory policies, the HUD, government? How realistic is it to change the institutions that have brainstormed on how to create this separation and segregation? And
well, I'll start off with NAR. NAR has put a policy together that deals with racism, and they've been a big proponent. NAR works with the different organizations, whereas NARAB, the Asian American Association. NAR has changed their tune, and they're working very hard. What NAR needs is for more minorities to get involved and bring your thought process to the table. And don't leave it to just a few of us. Bring your thoughts to the table, attend these conventions, give your insight. So NAR, in my opinion, has made leaps and bounds of where it used to be. And so at this point, and so I don't think NAR is there. What was the other part of that question?
FHA, HUD, all the government institutions that have.
Well, what we have to do is elect people and then tell them they need to enforce those rules. So when you elect a government official, when you are interviewing for presidents and stuff, who are you going to be in charge of housing? Here we are in our current situation. We've got a doctor who knows nothing about housing over housing. And I could go on, but we have to start putting people and holding people accountable in those particular jobs. And when we have politicians locally in our local governments, when we're interviewing mayors, who are you going to run your housing department? Who are you going to have? What are your housing policies? And then we have to hold them accountable. The only way for us to fix all this is to vote. We have to be able, you can't fix this virus, you can't kill it till you start voting. And when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, we vote them out. That's how we handle things. And so my thought is that over time, we've got to hold people accountable. We tend to not do that. We want to come to the rescue of our person we voted. We don't want to think that we made a bad decision, but we do. That's part of life.
Absolutely. And what you said, vote and hold accountable. That goes hand in hand. You can't just vote and stand on party politics and say, oh, they won. But after they win is when the hard work starts to happen, right? Where we have to call them and make our voice known.
And we've got to get away from party politics. We've got to look at people based on their character and their morals and who they are. History tells nothing that's going on right now surprises me because the history was already in place. We can't vote party, whether it's Democrat or Republican. We have to hold the people accountable based on them and make sure that they're following the rules that we want to follow. And so my thought process here is just that we can't stop voting party. We got to vote people. Everybody that looks like me is not in favor of doing the best for me. And those are some of the things that we're past having the first Black this or the first Asian here. We now have to start holding those people accountable. What are you gonna do? Well, a lot of them will say, well, I'm the governor or the county commissioner for everybody. Okay, but what are you gonna do for me and people? How are you gonna balance this out? And I think we gotta start asking our politicians the hard questions and be willing to advocate power for righteousness. And that's the problem that we have in this world today, is that everybody's about power. Everybody wants to be able to pick up a phone and say, I know such and such, but what if such and such is not doing the right thing? We've got to start advocating for morals, character, and making sure that people that we elect are held accountable. And the only thing we got to do is vote. That's the only thing you do. If you said that you're not voting because your guy didn't win, that is a cop-out. You just voted for the other guy. And I encourage everyone to, I don't tell you who to vote for, but go and vote and support the people who you feel that's gonna carry your water. And in the realtors, we have a thing called Realtor Party. And what Realtor Party is that we support Republicans, we support Democrats. You've gotta have a seat at the table no matter who's in office. And currently right now, if we've got two people of the same party running and we got a different party in Washington, how do we get to talk to those people? It is so important that we have balance. And Bincy, one of the things I like to say, and this is an old adage that's been worn out, absolute power corrupts. I don't care if it's all Democrat, all Republican, doesn't matter who it is. You have to have some accountability and some balance to be able to move forward and get this done. The reason we're having all the problems we're having, because we have no accountability in Washington anymore. You know, we've got a president who's saying we're not going to enforce any housing rules. Oh, you don't want, I'm going to save suburbia. Come on.
I mean, save them from people that look like you and me, apparently.
Yeah. And the people in suburbia are people that look like me.
Exactly. Shad, anything else? I mean, we've hit everything that we thought we would talk about and a lot more. I appreciate your time. Any other final thoughts? I mean, you've basically inspired us all as we're signing off today. I'm really grateful that you and I are both realtors, and we represent a couple of different generations of folks that are committed to this work, that we are here. And to my fellow Malayalees or Indians or other folks that are going to be seeing this, I think our commitment to the work is not just because we think that we're going to be affected by this today or tomorrow, although with all the new policies that are coming up, you never know when it's going to be this group or that group that's targeted. But I'm always full of gratitude and appreciation for what the civil rights movement has done for this country, and for the opportunity that immigrants had as a direct result of that. And I think, if my parents had come or immigrated with me 40 years ago, 50 years ago, to a country that didn't have fair housing, to a country that didn't have these rights, we would all be living in a very different way and having a very different battle that we were fighting at this time. So it is on the backs of the great heroes like John Lewis, MLK, Rosa Parks, folks, that we are here now. And it is up to us, united, to figure out how to make sure that the progress doesn't stop with us, but pushes forward.
Well, I'd like to thank your group, Malayalees, and all your group for inviting me here. Guys, we cannot do this without you, and we need you involved with it. What's so inspiring to me is that Black Lives Matters. I see white people out there marching. I see Hispanics out there marching. I see Malayalees out there marching. I see everybody we can't fix this by ourselves. We've got to stand together, because I pledge allegiance to this country all the time. The thing that bothers me more than anything else is that people wrap themselves up in the flag, and it's a symbol, but not the principles of that flag. And my thought is that the only way for us to fix it is your group, Hispanics, Asian, any minority group, to get involved, because after me, it's going to be you. And we've got to continue to do it. Fascism is in this country live and well. And it's just that, think about it. There had Jewish people helping Hitler. And in the end, those Jewish people ended up in Auschwitz, just like those people that they helped send there. We've got to work as a group. And the thing that I will tell you, what makes this country great, why you came here, was for the opportunities. And it's so sad that now all of a sudden immigrations are bad. But in the early 1900s, when you couldn't even come here at all, the country fluttered along. Then all of a sudden we started getting people in here that were doctors, lawyers, people coming in, and they all had this great thought process. In one of these days, when you do this, let's go over inventions. Let me tell you all the things that Black people have invented in this country, from blood transfusions to the traffic light. And you would never know that they did, but other people have been here all these years and had all opportunities and couldn't come up with the idea. Think about Hidden Figures. The men go to the moon, couldn't get back, but that one Black lady could figure out math-wise how to get them back home. And all those white guys could not do it. It's because of diversity. And thank you so much. And I'm just appreciative that you guys have gotten involved. We can't do it without you, and we need you. And I'm just very thankful that you guys would take the time to hear me today. And we can fix this, and we can change this around. It should not be a debate on fairness and equal justice. This should be something that should be there. And we should call it out when you see it being done. Call it out. If I'm sitting and my mother says something about that disparaging, I'm saying, Mom, that's just not the right way. That's not true. We've got to start calling people out. Stop being silent, because if you are, you're in agreement.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Shad. And I will see you in our next meeting. And to everyone else who's watching, have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Bincy. Appreciate you.
Thank you.